I never could have predicted it would end like this. I hadn't pictured him leaving, nor had I imagined our tale would close with such a muted, gentle resolve. In one fleeting instant, a single sentence barely spoken altered the trajectory of our lives. "I can't keep living this way," I whispered, more to the quiet corners of my own soul than to him. Though my voice carried just enough for him to hear, I had steeled myself for a tempest, for shouting, for desperate pleas, or even for him to argue that we could repair what had fractured between us. I braced for a surge of emotion, perhaps tears, but instead there was only a profound stillness. His gaze didn't spark with fury or dim with bewilderment. It was empty, as if carved out by time, as though my words weren't a sudden confession, but a faint reverberation of a truth he had quietly borne for far too long. Then he did something unexpected, something I hadn't prepared for in all my imagining. He leaned in close, his breath a soft warmth against my cheek, and pressed a tender kiss to my temple. It wasn't a kiss of longing or urgency. It was a goodbye, a delicate recognition that our story had reached its end. Without a single word, he stood, draped his coat over his frame, and walked out. The door closed with a soft click, leaving me rooted in place, wrapped in a silence that weighed more heavily than any argument we'd ever shared. I didn't rush after him. I didn't call his name or beg him to stay. I just sat there, a hollow pang spreading through my chest, anchoring me to the moment. The second those words slipped from my lips, I knew I had crossed an unseen line. But I hadn't anticipated this vast emptiness in their wake. I thought we'd collide in a storm of words, that we'd tumble into one of those raw, messy arguments where emotions flare like wildfire. And somehow, in the chaos, we'd find a way to stitch ourselves back together. But there was no clash, no raised voices, just a deep, smothering quiet that settled over the room like a thick mist. His expression remained calm, unreadable, as if he were absorbing the gravity of my admission. "I can't keep living this way," I had murmured, scarcely intending for the truth to escape. But it did. And in that moment everything changed. It had been building for so long, hadn't it? The widening gap between us, the unspoken hurts, the weariness that had crept into our lives like a slow tide. We weren't truly partners anymore. Just two people moving through the motions of parenthood, tied by habit but no longer by love. Somewhere along the way, the fire that had once defined us had flickered out. As I sat there waiting for him to respond, I realized I had waited too long to speak, too long to confront the truth I'd buried deep. This wasn't a marriage anymore. It was a routine, a checklist of tasks, and no amount of pretending could revive what we had lost. He met my gaze then, and with the smallest, most sorrowful nod, he acknowledged it. It wasn't the reaction I had braced for. No defense, no counterargument, just a quiet acceptance. As if he had been waiting for me to voice what we had both known for months, perhaps years. He rose slowly, deliberately, and I tensed, uncertain of what would follow. Would he lash out? Would he finally say the words we had both avoided? But no. He drew a steady breath, leaned forward, and kissed my temple. That kiss carried everything. The happiness we had once shared, the pain we had weathered, the years we had intertwined, and the undeniable end of it all. Then, without a word, he turned and left, his footsteps fading into the distance as the door closed behind him. I didn't pursue him. I didn't plead for him to stay. Perhaps it was because I knew deep within that this wasn't solely his decision. It was mine as well. I had pushed him to this point just as he had pushed me. We were both responsible, both too exhausted to fight for what we had once held dear. But that understanding didn't dull the pain. The next morning was excruciating. The children woke early, their voices bright and lively, filling the house as I went through the motions, stirring batter for pancakes, filling glasses with juice, tying tiny shoelaces. But everything felt off kilter. The house was quieter, the silence sharper, oppressive. His side of the bed remained untouched. His shoes no longer lined up by the door. His coat absent from the hallway. Our home, once vibrant with the joyful chaos of family, now felt like an empty husk. I kept waiting for him to walk back through the door to say something, anything. But he didn't. The silence stretched on, and with each passing day, his absence grew more acute. I missed him. Not just his presence, but the way he could coax a laugh from me even when I fought it. The comfort of his touch.